the skill that has got us here is definitely perseverance. I tell people in my industry, in my company, those who survive will thrive.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer, ADP. I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in. All right, welcome back, Freedom Point podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into another episode of the Freedom Point. So glad you're here with us today. I have an amazing guest here with me today, Jeremy Beland. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be on your show today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for joining. Just a little bit of a background on Jeremy. So Jeremy is with REI Freedom. Him and his wife have done amazing things in real estate. Get this, since 2017, they've bought over 400 properties in 6 different states, starting with just $11,000 and just a gigantic dream, okay? Even though they both had full-time jobs and 5 kids, him and his wife, they made it work. They downsized in 2016 to invest in more real estate. Now their business is booming, and they're now in a place where they can help others do the same. So, Jeremy, really appreciate, again, you being here on the show with us today. After I kind of read your bio there, it sounded like the kind of the rags to riches story, almost in a certain way. Can you kind of help us unpack a little bit more about kind of your journey, of
Sure.
of where you started and kind of where you're at today?
It's rag to riches a few times, and I'll start at the beginning, and I'll try to get through this quickly, but it's going to take me a few minutes to explain. So basically, I came into this world with a single mom that was basically homeless. So her and I, for the first part of my life, were just bouncing around from place to place. She used to live on welfare and everything else. So, my early years, my first 5, 6, 7 years of my life were really, really challenging in this life. And then she got married, and we started to really experience what lower class middle America was like. We had a house in a suburban town, and everything was great in my adolescence and my teenage years. And then when I was about 13 years old, they ended up losing everything. We ended up losing everything. They went to foreclosure. We lost our house, went to bankruptcy. They lost everything, had all of our cars repossessed overnight, that kind of deal. We just came out one morning, all the cars were gone. Like, what do we do now? And that was like my first real experience at an age where I could understand things. And then from there, we really just like bounced around like every 6 to 12 months from one place to another. I ended up going to 3 different high schools. And basically because of their mess, my life decided to become a mess personally. Started to get into a lot of trouble at school, started getting into drugs and drinking and all that stuff. And, fortunately, I didn't do anything too bad, but I was around people who did. And fortunately, I was able to get through that. And then about 19, 20 years old, I started getting into lifting weights. You could probably tell a little bit that I still exercise. It's really been a foundation of my success ever since. And it kind of just steered me in the right path. And then, I was playing semi-pro football. A friend of mine came up and said, "Hey, I think you'd be great at this job." And it was basically a sales job to sell copiers and printers and fax machines. And I never even owned a tie in my life at this point. I was high-rise window cleaning in Boston, hanging off skyscrapers for $12 an hour. I was like, sure. So I took the job, got the job. Don't even know how I got it. Had some moderate success with it, and then got myself into another sales position. And then I got married. Met this girl. We basically, I bought a house. I got new cars. I had 2 young kids. Life was great. For me, I felt like I hit the epitome of what I've always dreamed about, like the white picket fence scenario, right? That I always watch on, sitcoms growing up that I always wish and longed to have. Well, that was going great. I was making 6 figures. Life was great. Kids were great. Putting additions on the house. We had a pool, all of it. And then all of a sudden, 2009 came along and completely changed everything. So for some of you guys that may be listening to this podcast, remember 2009, we had the Great Recession. And that wasn't just a housing crisis. It was also an employment crisis. And within a year of basically making 6 figures, having nice equity in my home, I found myself without a job and upside down in equity in my home. And because I didn't graduate high school or go to college, I could not find a job anywhere for the life of me. And now I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I started to spiral into depression. And at that time, I started learning about real estate investing because I was starting to get the entrepreneurial bug with direct marketing and some real estate and stuff like that. And then, but I didn't really know how to get out of my situation. I was, doing cold calling, which back then was like a big fat yellow phone book of yellow pages trying to get myself a job. I couldn't find a job anywhere. To make a long story short, I couldn't afford to go to college. An opportunity came in that I could join the Air Force. And I was going to go to the Air Force to get some training to do what I thought was a recession-proof job. I was going to learn network security. I was going to come out and sell firewalls because no matter what the recession or economy is, people are going to need firewalls. At least that was my thought process at the time. But in order to get into the military for that position, I needed to make sure that I didn't go through foreclosure and bankruptcy, which I was on the brink of both at this time, which was really devastating to me because I basically said, oh my God, I become my parents. History has repeated itself. I made all this success and now I'm about to lose it. And it was really devastating for me. So because I knew a little bit of real estate investing, I reached out to a real estate investor in the area because back then, for the people that don't remember, there was no help. The mortgage companies were folding up left and right. There's no refinance options. There was no loan modifications. There was nothing. You either went to foreclosure or a short sale. I reached out to a real estate investor. He came, gave us a position to a short sale a house, which saved me from foreclosure, which saved me from bankruptcy. That guy was a superstar in my life. At the time when I had no money, he was buying our, because you can't profit off of a short sale. He was like buying our pool from us, buying us like our appliances, and he was giving us cash that was literally like food on my kids. Or food for, to feed my kids, Christmas presents, clothes on their back. It was like basic necessities, which I couldn't provide anymore. It was awful. So I hit dirt low, rock bottom on that. And then I was able, thanks to him, to get into the military, join the Air Force at 33, almost 34 years old. My nickname in basic training was Gramps because I was in with a bunch of 17-year-old kids. But this gave me a chance to get away from my family for 6 months, to rebuild myself and start working on myself. But it was really the only way I could provide a cost of living. I went from making like $130,000 a year to $32,000 a year, being displaced from my family for 6 months. So that's what I had to do. Desperate times, desperate measures. Came back, ended up getting a divorce. Then a couple of years after that, found myself in a position where I was doing sales again, built myself back up to 6 figures. And it was around 2015, 2016. This is before I was, with my wife now. And I just started to approach 40 years old. And I was like, I had this fear. And as you get older, you start to see people who've been working for corporate America for all these years. And as they become 40 to 50 years old and they become high income earners, they start to become replaceable. And I had that fear that could happen again. I went through it as a kid, already went through it as an adult. I'm like, the 401k I have is not going to get me retired. I don't know what I'm going to do if this happens again. So I started to really think I need to start taking things into my, control for myself. And that's when I decided to go back into real estate investing, but I had no money. So I was a divorced dad of 2 young kids. I said, I want to do this, which was what we call as wholesaling in the real estate world, because I didn't know how to use other people's money and things that we do in this industry now. But I had to come up with $11,000, or basically $10,000, $5,000 for a coaching program, some marketing money and stuff like that to get into this program. So basically what I did, because I had no money, is I sold my townhouse. I had some equity in it, owned it a couple of years earlier. I sold it, made $17,000. I paid $6,000 off for credit card debt. I took $5,000, put into this coaching program. $6,000 went into marketing and getting the business up and running. That $11,000 investment has gone on today with obviously ongoing investments from wins. But as of today, that was January 2017, of over 425 properties that we've done off-market acquisitions and dispositions on. We bought and sold 425 properties, and we've done almost $10 million since then, which is mind-blowing. So now I live a world where I now live with my new wife, Michelle. We blended 5 kids during the time of starting this business. We worked full-time jobs for a couple of years, burning the candles on both ends. We moved like 3 times with all the kids. It was really, really hard. I wouldn't change it for the world, but that's my story, and that's where I am today.
Jeremy, that's remarkable. It's interesting. As I was kind of listening to you, share some of your background, it really reminded me a lot of myself.
Oh, wow.
Similar story, no rich uncles, troubled or challenged past. Continued to invest in myself from a sales skills perspective and
Yep.
really leveling up my own sales game, which we'll get back to that in just a minute. But, was impacted by the global financial crisis back in 07, 08, 09, have the desire to escape the dependence on the W-2 and, quote unquote, not become a corporate refugee anymore, realizing that even though I've maxed out my 401k plan for the last 25 years, the reality is I still only
Oh,
have enough money in that 401k to maybe cover living expenses, with 4 kids for maybe 3 years, right?
yeah.
Which is hard
Yeah.
to believe that I've spent 25 years maxing out a retirement vehicle to have a nest egg number in there that I could literally only live on for 3 years, right?
I I know it's
So
crazy. A lot of people think like, oh, if I have $1 million, I'll be a millionaire, right? But the reality is, if it was just you and your wife with $1 million, $50,000 a year, it's only 20 years, And if you're retiring, hopefully before 65, most of us live past 85 these days, hopefully anyway. So
yeah,
it doesn't go far.
I'd like to get personal with you a little bit here, if you don't
Please.
mind. And my personal question is really, what would you say is the biggest challenges you faced managing both a growing real estate portfolio alongside having a full-time job and a large family at the same time?
Whew, we were on autopilot. It reminds me of like when your babies are first born, those couple of years, and you're just doing the sleepless nights and all that stuff. It was really like that. I was very, I burned the boats once I sold my house. It had to work. There was no other choice. So I was really hungry to make it work. We failed forward. It was a lot of, massive imperfect action, as we would say, right? We're just feeling forward, just doing what we could, getting guidance, but still making a lot of mistakes and just trying to find a way forward. It wasn't easy. Blending 5 kids is not easy, especially with some of them teenagers. Moving around wasn't easy. It was a struggle. There was a couple times those first couple of years I thought it was all going to implode and it was going to be over. The skill that has got us here is definitely perseverance. Right, no matter what, is if you just keep pushing through, it's going to go. I tell people in my industry, in my company, those who survive will thrive, right? So we just need to survive the ups and downs, right? We had a correction this past year in the real estate world where interest rates went up. It hurt a lot of people. It wasn't a great year for us. It was okay, but it wasn't a great year. But we have to survive those things. And I feel like in those first few years, it was really just survival, but the biggest thing is my now wife, Shelly, and I are on the same page with everything. We share the same vision, the same dream. We're best friends, madly in love, great business partners. I mean, we spend all day, every day with each other. Everything we do is to build a life so we can spend more time together and with our children. So I would not have been able to have the success we have today without her by my side. She's an integral part of this whole operation up to now.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to have a business partner that complements your own skill set, and certainly from a visionary perspective, good to have both of you
Definitely.
guys on the same page. But yeah, I mean, you brought up a lot of really good points here, relative to kind of some of the challenges and the headwinds that people face in general, in real estate and outside of real estate. You talked about having a vision, you talked about having perseverance, really the daily grind and being okay with the fact that there's going to be a grind. This is not easy or everybody would do it kind of a mentality,
Right.
right? And also, this concept of surviving and thriving. And there's all kinds of different, stages in the economic cycle, that we can be in at all times. So it really comes down to, I would say in your case, it's because, you've really mastered your sales skills, to a certain extent, right? Because a lot of
Yep.
what you talked about are good characteristics of high top shelf sales professionals. So why would you say that leveling up your sales pedigree or mastering sales skills is good not only in real estate but also in really all areas of life to a certain extent?
Yeah, I mean, you got to sell yourself on everything, right? Everything we do, we're trying to sell ourselves. I mean, children do it at a very young age, right? To get what they want, they're really good at selling themselves, and somehow society we're taught to suppress that ability to sell. But yeah, you're 100% accurate, right? When I came into a sales job in my 20s, I didn't know what I was doing, and I learned and learned and learned. I think because I moved around a lot, I had the personality to be more outgoing, and I can easily strike up conversations with random people. But sales skills has been critical for the success of our company. Matter of fact, that's why we have our coaching business now, is to teach the sales skills related to what we do, because in our industry, it's all because we work direct to seller. So our business model is we work with distressed people like I once was going through that short sale that need help, and we buy the properties from them. We provide a basically a solution to their problem, whatever their problem is. They have a unique problem. We give them a unique solution. But there's a lot of sales skills that go into that, and it's very specific for our industry. And ever since I've come into this, a lot of the ongoing coaching that I've invested in has been back into those sales for me and my team, and that's probably the biggest. That and discipline are probably the two biggest reasons for our success in our company at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen to that. So I'd like to maybe kind of switch gears if you don't mind, Jeremy. And I want to talk about the different states that you've invested into.
Sure.
If my memory serves me right, you decided, on 6 states to invest in. What criteria do you typically use when you evaluate, a new market to expand into?
Yeah, so back then wasn't really any. We started out in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. So those are our first 2 states. And then we had an opportunity after going to some training out in New York. We visited Buffalo, New York to see one of my mentors back then. And it was just like, wow, what an opportunity to do business here. And then we went out there and opened up another market to do our business model there. Failed for a little while. Then we had some great success. Then opportunities came up to some friends said, hey, we live in Las Vegas. Let's do some business. Hey, we're in Kansas. Let's do some business. And Vegas was a complete failure. Kansas was okay. We had some moderate success, but it was short-lived. Now we're in Florida because we have Dan Toback, who is basically the brother of 2 of my early mentors and coaches, and he's a really high-level person. We're really excited about an opportunity to go to Florida because that's kind of where we're going to transition to later on in our life. But it creates a lot of great opportunities that the Northeast doesn't here. So now, we're focused just on the Northeast and the Southeast of Florida. When we look into other markets, I would say that we're looking for home prices to be affordable from the area, right? So we wouldn't be going into, say, California along the ocean, right? Those houses, even Boston is really crazy expensive. So we're looking for first time home prices to be somewhere between $100,000 to maybe $450,000 in that price point. Under $100,000, some of those markets, there's a lot of opportunity. But you can get yourself in a situation where the house needs more work than the property is even worth. Then obviously we stay out of economies that are tanking or failing and areas of bad crime. Some people make good money in there, but that's not anything I would ever want to take on.
Yeah, it sounds to me like what you're also saying is that real estate is very hyper local, right? So
it's very local.
Your assessment of maybe that particular MSA within Florida is going to be different than maybe just outside of Boston, as an example.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, more or less our business model would work in almost any economy here in America, the way we do things. But for what we want to do as far as holding on to some of these properties, not because we buy and flip and buy and sell as is, we also buy and hold. And, there's certain markets that those perform better. Like we own a few properties in New York. I'm never going to buy any more properties in New York. I want nothing to do with New York. Nothing against New York. Just it's a tough state to do business in from a real estate perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you walk us through a particular memorable deal that you have and maybe what lessons it taught you?
Yeah, well, we could talk about my very first deal. When I was just starting out in 2017, we sent out our marketing and, we came across this lady. It was called an absentee owner, which means she owns a property that she didn't live in. She lived out of state. And, this lady was born around Chernobyl. And she was like an older lady, but she had battled cancer her whole life. She moved to Russia and she lived in Maine. And she was a very strong Russian, hardy lady. Everything you would picture in your mind, that's exactly how she was. Very strong and stern, but she battled cancer, beat it a few times, and she came down with cancer again. And it was a situation where she could no longer get the standard treatment that America provides for cancer treatment. She needed something else or else, the worst was inevitable. So she came across a situation where she could get special help out of state of the art new tests, state of the art stuff, treatment out in Chicago. but it was out of pocket. Her insurance wouldn't cover it. So her only option was to sell this house that she owned, that her brother was living in, then moved out, and she was just sitting on it. And there was equity in it. And she wasn't living in it. She was never going to fix it up and flip it. She just owned it because she inherited it along the way. So, I reached out to her and, she got my letter in the mail. We started talking. And, after a few times of feeling my way forward, we were eventually be able to sell the house for her. We bought it and sold it to another investor. That's what we call wholesaling in our industry. That's how I started out. We signed the contract. I only made it $5,000. I still got the check today, a whopping $5,000. It just, for me, it wasn't really about the money. It was like, oh my God, I can do this, proof of concept. But that, this is the epitome of what we do, right? So that person had a problem. A traditional sale wouldn't have worked for her because the house wouldn't have qualified for traditional or conventional financing. She needed to sell it quickly because she needed the money and get to Chicago. Literally the day after we closed, she was out to Chicago for like 6 weeks to get this treatment because it was like $100,000. And, she was so incredibly thankful that we were going to be able to help her save her life. And I know that's kind of an extreme situation. We don't always go out and save lives. But like when I went through my situation in 2009, that real estate investor didn't come in and short sale my house, I wouldn't be here today. Good thing or bad things happen to good people all the time. And I got a reset button that day in life. So basically what my business model does is we go around finding people who need reset buttons and we get paid by giving them reset buttons in life.
Yeah, no, that's a great story. I mean, you've had plenty of second, third, fourth, fifth, opportunities in life, right? Or chances. Yeah. And you're really giving, those homeowners, kind of that maybe second chance or that lifeline that they could really use at that particular time in their life. So that's great. What's with all the experience that you've gained, over the years, what advice would you be looking to give someone that's looking to get started in real estate for the first time with limited resources?
Yeah, it's tough with limited resources. You can definitely do it if you have limited resources. I mean, I had to sell my house to get it done, right? You know, if you're going to start any business, you're going to need some resources. What we do in real estate, a lot of people think you could just kind of do it for free. You can, but literally 99.9% of those people never succeed. And, and out of those that do, many of them don't even make it to that first year, never mind their first deal. So you can learn stuff from like YouTube University. You could read books. And if you have the discipline and power to do it, you could do it. I know people who have done it with little to no money out of pocket, but they're the few and far between. And, and you're better off to, rather than rack up credit card debt for a vacation or overspend for a car, invest into this. If you're going to start a landscaping business, you would need a trailer or a truck or some lawnmowers and some yard equipment to get things going, right? That's what you need. And if you could come up with a modest investment of like $5,000 to $10,000 here, you can literally grow it into hundreds of thousands of dollars within a couple of years, if not millions within about 3 or 4 years. Typically in our business, you could have a very successful business in about 3 years that's very profitable.
Yeah, that's great. What's kind of maybe next on Jeremy and Shelly's bucket list, either personally or professionally?
Yeah, personally, we have about a third out of 5 kids ready to go off. And as we empty the nest, we still got 2 more to go. So we're looking forward to empty nest life and traveling. We're going to be a little bit of nomads. We're going to probably live from Airbnb to Airbnb for a while until we figure out where to settle down south, and just travel and have fun together. So we're building for that chapter of our life. We're doing that by still, a lot of self-development. I'm still getting coaching, putting self-development and coaching back into my business and the people in my business. We want to continue to get our businesses better and grow and healthier and stronger. Those aren't going anywhere. And then from a personal science standpoint, on top of that, we're trying to buy as many properties as we can because, as we know, appreciation only goes up in this country. You buy a property, sell it 10 years. It's a lot better than your 401k. So that's my goal, is buy as many properties as I can as well.
What would be a good potential coaching client for you? What would that person typically be looking for from you?
Yeah, so somebody who has already maybe done some deals, who's already flipped a few houses, who's bought a few rentals, who has maybe wholesaled some properties and is looking to get it to a point where they can consistently do it every month, maybe get away from their 9 to 5, or need help turning it into a legitimate business. Our coaching program is perfect for teaching those people. We can teach people from the ground up, but a lot of those people are not always the right fit for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would be maybe one or two different ways that our listening audience can learn more about you and connect with you outside of the podcast today?
Yeah, I appreciate that. The best way is to, if you're on Facebook, is to go to our Facebook group page. It's called REI Freedom, because I made a wonderful life of freedom, time freedom through real estate investing. So it's REI Freedom. If you go to that Facebook group, we give a ton of resources away that we put a ton of value in there to coach, to teach away for free in there. Pinned at the top are some PDFs to help your sales training in this industry. Our coaches in there every day giving lives of free content. So just come in there. It's a place of collaboration, ask questions, foster and grow. If you have any questions or want to learn more, that's the best place to go, is REI Freedom on the Facebook group.
That's great. Jeremy, I really appreciate you joining us on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And listening audience, thank you again for jumping into another episode of The Freedom Point. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.